Where the hell are you? The funeral's already started. What are you doing? Get back here now.
My stepchild, Dorothy's voice blared through the phone and I grimaced.
Can you stop yelling at me? I have no intention of attending the funeral.
At that, Dorothy burst into tears.
Are you kidding me? What kind of wife doesn't attend her husband's funeral when she's the chief mourner? Everything's a mess over here. Just do what you're supposed to do already.
For the past 8 years, I've been despised by my husband George, Dorothy, and my grandson Kevin. On the day George passed away, I found out something that made me quietly move out and disappear on the day of the funeral. Dorothy called me in tears, but I have no plans to attend the funeral. After all, they've been taking everything from me for the past 8 years. Now, it's my turn. After this, my retaliation will cause Dorothy and Kevin to lose everything. My name is Amanda. I'm 60 years old and work for a foreign insurance company. I decided to work for a company that had just entered the American market because I studied German in college. People told me I was taking a risk. Since starting the job, I worked from early morning to late at night, practically every day of the year. Spending my 20s like that, I didn't have time for a boyfriend and just focused on work. When I was in my early 30s, I got promoted and became more efficient at my job, giving me a bit more free time. Thinking it was about time to start seeking my own happiness, I signed up for a matchmaking service that was popular at the time. At first, I couldn't find any good matches through the service. Just as I was starting to truly understand how difficult marriage is, I had a fateful encounter.
Nice to meet you, I'm George.
The muscular man greeted me with a gentle smile that gave a kind impression. This was my first meeting with the man who would later become my husband, George. George was 4 years older than me and worked in sales for a small company. He had been married before but divorced his ex-wife 2 years ago due to incompatible personalities. We hit it off, both being in sales even if in different industries. We bonded over a shared love of travel and decided to start dating with the intention of getting married. George was a gentleman on our dates, and I was thrilled to be in love again after so long. After that, George and I dated for about a year without any issues. Then, for our first anniversary, George and I made plans to go on a trip together to a resort hotel. Part of me was hoping he might propose on this trip. With those feelings in my heart, I waited for him at our agreed upon meeting spot. Eventually, George's car pulled up to where I was waiting. The moment I tried to greet George with a smile as he got out, I froze. Because 2 strangers emerged from the back seat of the car. One was a flashily dressed woman who looked to be in her 60s. The other was a girl of about 10 clutching a comic book.
Huh? George, who are these people?
George turned to the 2 of them.
Oh, this is my family. My mom and daughter. Come on, say hello.
Then George's mother Donna looked at me and said, I'm George's mother, Donna.
So you're George's girlfriend?
You have such a plain face. No one in our family line has a plain face like that. Makes you look severe, doesn't it? Even more than Donna's rude comments, I was shaken by the girl's presence. Daughter? Did he say daughter? He never said a word about having a child. Prompted by George, the girl looked up from her comic book to greet me.
I'm Dorothy,
was all she said before returning her gaze to the comic.
George, what is this? I don't understand anything that's happening.
As I grew flustered, George told me.
Oh, when I said I was going on a trip, these 2 said they wanted to come along too. It's fine, right? We're at a nice resort, let's all enjoy it together.
That's not what I wanted to know though. In the end, still bewildered, I got into the car at George's urging.
George, you have a daughter?
When I managed to ask that in the car without sounding rude, George said, Did I not mention it? I took custody of my daughter from my previous marriage and I'm raising her. Then Donna chimed in.
I mean, I'm the one doing most of the raising though. I'm so happy to finally be free of that role.
I lifted my head with a surprised.
Huh?
But George said.
Get along with both Dorothy and my mom, okay? Come on, try talking to them.
I hesitantly turned around to face the back seat and addressed them.
I'm Amanda, George's girlfriend. Nice to meet you both.
Donna retorted. Well, I've already heard the gist of it, so no need to introduce yourself. I said to Dorothy.
Dorothy, nice to meet you.
Dorothy just replied, yeah, and went back to reading her comic book. Amid the awkward atmosphere, George and Donna started chatting about neighborhood gossip that I didn't understand. I was still completely confused. Not only had I not yet processed that George had a child who he had custody of, but who brings their family along on a trip with their girlfriend without asking? What was going to happen on this trip? When we arrived at the hotel, the rooms were of course split with me and George in one, and Donna and Dorothy in the other. The moment we were alone, I hurriedly said to George,
George, what is this? You never told me you had a daughter. We've been dating for a year and you never said a word about this.
George looked at me in surprise.
I guess I forgot to mention it. Whatever, it's not a big deal.
I held back what I wanted to say and told him.
And bringing your family on our couple's trip without asking is not okay.
George still looked at me quizzically.
Why are you making a fuss about that? We're going to be family anyway, it's fine.
It's no use, he doesn't get it. I felt dizzy. George said,
I'm going to take a walk around the hotel.
And promptly left, leaving me at a complete loss. Soon it was time for dinner, and of course Donna and Dorothy were there. It was a lavish meal, but I could barely swallow any of it. Suddenly, the lights in the dining room dimmed and music started playing. As I wondered what was happening, a staff member approached with a cake and bouquet of deep red roses, handing the bouquet to George. No way, is this, no way.
Amanda, I love you. Will you marry me?
George said with a self-satisfied look on his face. All eyes in the room were on our table, and everyone there was waiting for me to say yes. How many people in the world could respond with, let me think about it for a bit? After being put on the spot like that? In a trembling voice, I said, I would be honored. At that, the surrounding guests broke into applause and cheers. Words of congratulations and whistles flew our way. The lights returned to normal and the guests went back to their own meals. I sat there in a daze, clutching the bouquet and watching Dorothy eat cake.
Well, now that we've taken care of what needed to be done, let's talk about what's next.
Donna's words pulled me back to reality.
I'm giving my blessing to Amanda and George's marriage, so be grateful. We'll all be living together as soon as the house is built.
Without thinking,
Huh?
I blurted out. Living together? As soon as the house is built?
Yeah. Mom and I decided to build a pretty big house. I mean, even if we're family, it's better to have some privacy, right? This is for Amanda's sake too.
George said something like that.
I'll have my own room too, right, Dad?
To which,
of course you will,
George replied. As the three of them got all excited, I just sat there frozen. After that, I ended up signing the marriage certificate in a daze. I tried my best to think positively about it in my own way. I'm marrying the man I love. George doesn't mean any harm. I'm looking forward to the new house, and it's a good thing to have a bigger family. And so George and I got married. All of a sudden, I became a mom to 10-year-old Dorothy. Before moving in together, I read books and tried my best to be a good mom to Dorothy. On the day we finally moved in together, I approached Dorothy.
Dorothy, I'm looking forward to being a family. I'd be happy if you could treat me like a mom.
Dorothy looked up at me and said,
That's so annoying. Just don't bug me too much, okay?
I froze, but Dorothy promptly went to her own room. I felt uneasy about the future, but I convinced myself that Dorothy was a teenager after all, and it was natural for her to have complicated feelings about a parent remarrying. However, life after that was hell. Donna suddenly said this to me.
From now on, Amanda will be doing all the housework, got it?
I tried to explain that my job was very demanding, but Donna glared at me.
That's no excuse. You married George, so work hard at home too.
And Donna really did abandon all the housework. It would have been fine if George or Dorothy helped out at least. But they just did their own thing and never lifted a finger to help. On top of that, they started complaining that the cleaning wasn't done or the food was bland. I endured it and spent my days doing chores, but instead of being grateful, they started treating me coldly. Right after we got married, George said work was getting busy and he was hardly ever home. His business trips increased, and he'd go out on weekends too, saying he had to work on his days off. During those times, I'd be alone with Donna and Dorothy, and I struggled in my relationship with Dorothy.
Ugh, fish again? I want to eat steak or something.
Dorothy looked at the grilled salmon I made with disgust.
Dorothy, you're a picky eater, so you need to learn to eat everything. Eat your fish properly.
I said that, but Dorothy ignored me. Donna spoiled Dorothy like that, giving her snacks and such. As she headed back to her room, Dorothy said dismissively to me,
"You're so annoying. Don't lecture me."
I continued to agonize over how to interact with Dorothy. Around that time, George handed me some documents.
"Fill those out for me." "Huh?"
I looked at them and saw they were documents to transfer the mortgage to my name.
"What do you mean, fill them out?"
As I grew confused, George said, "I took out the mortgage in my name for now, but the payments are tough after all. You make more money, Amanda, so you pay it. I'll cover all the living expenses in exchange." I refused over and over, but George wouldn't budge. "Then what do you want to do? Sell this house? Then the four of us will be crammed in a tiny apartment. I'm fine with that, you know." He went on and on like that until I finally agreed to transfer the house to my name and pay the mortgage, on the condition that George covers all the living expenses. But Donna and Dorothy, not knowing any of that, continued to harass me. The intensity of Dorothy's abuse was especially terrible as she fully entered her teenage years. But I endured it, telling myself I had become Dorothy's mom. After 8 years of living like that, Dorothy graduated high school, got a job, and was set to move out. My relief was short-lived. A malignant tumor was found in Donna and she was hospitalized. It happened quickly after that. Donna grew weaker and weaker, passing away in less than a year. George cried, likely struggling with losing his mom. Thinking about everything Donna had done to me, I wasn't very sad, but I couldn't bring myself to think serves you right either, so I just stoically went. When I saw Dorothy again at Donna's funeral after a long time, she seemed to have gained weight overall. I thought maybe her eating habits had gotten worse living alone, but then she dropped a bombshell.
"I'm pregnant. I don't know who the father is though. So I'm moving back into this house to raise the baby."
I said.
"What?"
In shock. I looked at George and he seemed surprised too. No wonder, Dorothy isn't even 20 years old yet. And yet, she's going to have a child without knowing who the father is? What on earth is going on? I thought surely George would scold her, but my expectations were betrayed.
"If that's the case, then come back home. I'd be happy to live with my grandchild too."
Dorothy,
"Thanks, Dad,"
seemed delighted. I felt dizzy. Just when I thought I was finally free from living with Donna, now Dorothy is coming back?
"So, I'm counting on you,"
Dorothy said with an eerie grin while rubbing her belly. After that, Dorothy really did come back home and, as expected, started treating me like a housekeeper again. Then a few months later, she gave birth. It was a boy, and Dorothy named him Kevin. Babies really are adorable, aren't they? I never had my own, but I wanted to try holding him.
"Dorothy, can I hold Kevin too?" "No way. Why should I let a stranger hold him?"
As I stood there frozen, only George happily cradled Kevin. After Dorothy was discharged from the hospital, she dumped almost all of Kevin's care on me. I had to do things I'd never done before, like changing diapers and making formula, and deal with his crying at night too. Dorothy would just pick Kevin up and spoil him, but didn't do any of the actual caretaking. Still, I did the best I could for Kevin's sake. I bought books on baby food and patiently fed it to Kevin, and paid for all the diapers and such myself. When Kevin finally started being able to say mama, he reached out his hand to me and tried to call for me.
No, Kevin, I'm Grandma." "Grandma."
As I tried to teach him that, Dorothy snatched Kevin away and told him,
"That's wrong, Kevin. That person is a stranger. She's not Grandma."
Dorothy didn't work, didn't properly raise her child, and just stayed home all day. But I still couldn't bring myself to be harsh with Dorothy when she had such a young child. Before I knew it, 8 years had passed since Dorothy moved back in. George was hardly ever home as usual and was indifferent to me. The rare times he did come home, he'd complain about how the food tasted or how his shirts were ironed. At some point, George started saying, "I'm in a tough financial situation," and barely gave me any of the living expenses he had promised. Dorothy is 27 years old now, but incredibly, she still doesn't work. She relies on us for everything in her life while calling me a stranger and treating me like a servant. After Kevin started elementary school, he was often out playing during the day. As for Kevin, because he's seen me being treated like a slave by Dorothy since he was little, he seems to think I have the lowest status in the family.
Hey, hurry up and give me my allowance.
This is how he talks as a second grader. It seems he causes problems at school too, but Dorothy doesn't do anything about it.
Kevin, I just gave you money the other day. You have to be careful with how you spend it.
When I said that, Kevin glared at me and hurled more verbal abuse. Sometimes he even raised his hand to me, and I was fed up. Around this time, I started recording Dorothy and Kevin's horrible words and saving the audio files under the name Abuse Collection. I didn't have any particular reason for doing that. I just felt like it somehow relieved my stress a little to do it. I suddenly had a thought. Why am I putting up with this life again? It was for the simple reason that I had married George, that's all. I'm the one who agreed to the marriage, no one else. I continued this life out of resignation and a sense of duty. After 8 years of being hated and blamed by my entire family, my self-esteem had completely plummeted. Before I knew it, I had even started to think it was my own fault I was being treated this way. Then one day, an incident occurred. I got a call on my cell phone from the police station. Actually, about George. It was news that George had died in a traffic accident. Apparently on the way to a resort a little ways away, he lost control of the steering wheel or something and drove off a cliff. I arrived at the hospital and confirmed his identity. It was definitely George. As I watched Dorothy break down crying, it still didn't feel real to me. George is dead. Is this for real? In a daze, I received George's belongings from the police. Among them was his undamaged smartphone. Something was bothering me. Why was George, who said he was on a business trip, near a resort area? When I opened George's smartphone in private, I was hit with a shocking truth.
I see. So that's how it was. I'll never forgive this.
In that moment, I made a decision in my heart. The next day, George's funeral was set to take place. I became the chief mourner and was tasked with arranging the funeral.
I have something I need to do, so you two go on ahead to the funeral venue.
I said that as I sent Dorothy and Kevin off to the venue, but Dorothy was just sobbing and didn't seem to hear my words at all. At this time, I left George's tablet from his belongings at the funeral venue. After dropping them off at the funeral hall, I returned home and muttered to myself,
"All right, let's do this."
And I had movers, whom I contacted the night before, take away the furniture, household goods, and my own belongings. The destination was my parents' home, as I had already explained the situation to them. My elderly parents told me,
"Come on home. You can stay as long as you want."
So I decided to take them up on that offer. After stoically completing the moving process, I went straight to my parents' home instead of George's funeral. At my parents' place, they had prepared all my favorite foods and were waiting for me. During the pleasant meal with my parents, my cell phone rang. The call was from Dorothy. I ignored it at first, but the phone kept ringing every 30 seconds. With a sigh, I decided to answer.
"What is it?"
On the other end, Dorothy screamed at me.
"Where the hell are you? The funeral's already started. What are you doing? Get back here now."
I grimaced at the sound of Dorothy's voice.
"Can you stop yelling at me? I have no intention of attending the funeral."
At that, Dorothy burst into tears.
"Are you kidding me? What kind of wife doesn't attend her husband's funeral? And you're the chief mourner but abandoned all the preparations, didn't you? Everything's a mess over here. Just do what you're supposed to do already."
So I calmly responded,
"If you ask the funeral home, they should be able to carry out the funeral itself. You're 27 years old now, so you should be able to handle it. Good luck."
Saying that, I ignored Dorothy's screaming and hung up the phone. It rang incessantly after that, but I kept ignoring it. I spent some much-needed relaxing time at my parents' home for the first time in a while. Around the time the funeral was probably wrapping up, I took a shower and checked my phone as I dried my hair. There were over 200 missed calls. Most of them were from Dorothy, but the most recent one was from an unknown number. I decided to call it back.
"Is this Amanda?"
The person who answered was Edward, George's brother, whom I had met a few times. If I recall correctly, he's currently the leader figure among the relatives. It's been a while. When I said that, Edward spoke in a voice mixed with anger and confusion.
Where are you? Why aren't you, George's wife, attending his funeral? It's been complete chaos over here. This is terribly inappropriate.
I told him with a sigh. Are all the relatives gathered there with you? Edward agreed.
Yes, we are.
And continued.
And Dorothy, who checked the house, said that the appliances and your belongings are gone. I don't understand what's going on with that either.
So I bluntly replied.
Yes. I moved out while the funeral was going on.
At that, Edward said.
What?
And I could hear the relatives behind him start to murmur as well.
What the hell are you thinking? The chief mourner doesn't show up to the funeral and moved out in the meantime? Get back here and explain yourself properly.
Dorothy was screaming on the other end of the phone, but I told Edward.
I left a tablet at the reception desk of the funeral hall. I'll make a video call so we can discuss the reason.
I then hung up for the moment and took out my own tablet. I made a video call to George's tablet that I had left behind. It connected right away, and I could see Dorothy, Kevin, Edward, and many relatives behind them. The moment she saw my face, Dorothy, with tear stains on her cheeks, yelled at me.
What are you doing? Get over here now. We'll talk after that.
I responded flatly.
No. I will not be coming there. Not tomorrow either, of course.
Dorothy flew into a rage and started berating me. The relatives looked at me suspiciously too. Edward said in a perplexed tone.
That's really too inappropriate. Amanda, you're the chief mourner, George's wife, and Dorothy's mother. Don't you have any compassion for George? You two were husband and wife.
And that's when I decided to tell them the truth.
Of course I was shocked when George died, and I had every intention of properly holding his funeral. But those intentions quickly disappeared. Why?
Edward asked in confusion. I told him.
Edward, everyone. Please listen to this first.
I took out George's smartphone from his belongings and played the voicemail. Hey George, where are you? You're already past the time we agreed on. We decided we're staying at a luxury hotel today, remember? Everyone on the other side of the tablet gasped. I continued playing the voicemail message. Ugh, why won't you pick up? Did Amanda find out? You told me you love me more than that ugly woman. Liar. I paused the playback for a moment. On the other side, the relatives were murmuring amongst themselves.
As you just heard, George was on his way to a trip with his mistress when he got in the accident. There were photos in his phone that I absolutely cannot show here.
I told everyone on the screen who were frozen in shock.
And George hated me. He didn't contribute to living expenses and only complained when he came home. On top of that, he was cheating. Wouldn't it be strange to have any affection left for someone like that?
Edward muttered in an upset voice.
George did something like that? That's...
Then from behind,
he's the worst. Even I wouldn't want to attend the funeral of a husband like that.
A female relative spoke up. Dorothy hurriedly interjected.
Even if Dad cheated, you should at least show up to the funeral. And him cheating in the first place is probably because you have no appeal.
Here Kevin butted in.
Hey, where'd you put the TV? I can't play video games.
The relatives were looking at them with disgust, but Dorothy and Kevin didn't seem to notice. Edward held his head in his hands.
Yes. Even if my love ran out because he cheated, if I had any affection for Dorothy and Kevin, I may have still attended the funeral. But I think you understand from what they just said. I've been constantly mistreated at home.
Dorothy looked shocked. The relatives turned cold gazes on her and Kevin. That's when I played my specially edited collection of their verbal abuse.
I told you not to wash your clothes with mine. Your dirty germs will spread to them. You're seriously disgusting.
Kevin's voice was included too.
I said don't give me carrots. Are you going senile? Hurry up and go buy me some juice, you useless hag.
A stream of Dorothy and Kevin's horrible insults played one after another. The relatives' faces grew more and more appalled.
Hey, stop that. It's dirty of you to record us.
Dorothy screamed that, but I continued playing the recordings expressionlessly. Kevin looked confused, as if he couldn't grasp the situation.
This is how it's been. It may be inappropriate to skip the funeral, and I may have inconvenienced you all. I apologize for that. But as you just heard, this is how Dorothy has been treating me. Kevin started doing the same, treating me like a slave.
I took a breath and said,
I have zero affection left for George or for them. This is why I didn't attend the funeral and moved out.
Dorothy started.
How dare you?
To yell at me. But Edward cut her off. Amanda, I'm sorry about Dorothy. I apologize on George's behalf too. You don't have to come to the funeral. They did enough to warrant this.
When I said, I'm glad you understand,
the relatives solemnly nodded in agreement. We'll scold Dorothy and Kevin on our end too. Thank you for putting up with being part of this family with them for so long. Edward said that and apologized to me. Then I ended the video call. I slept well that night. 2 days later, I got a call from Edward and he apologized again.
Dorothy and Kevin keep insisting you're the one in the wrong, Amanda. The relatives have completely given up on them. Please take care of yourself and be happy from now on.
After hanging up with Edward, I went back to my daily life. But 1 week after George's funeral, I finished work and exited the building to find Dorothy and Kevin waiting there. An enraged Dorothy grabbed me and dragged me to a cafe.
I don't want anything more to do with you two. What do you want?
When I asked that, Dorothy said,
I don't want to see your face either. But you won't answer your phone, so I had no choice. Tell me where Dad's inheritance is right now.
I muttered.
Inheritance?
And Dorothy exploded.
Dad must have had savings. There was only a debit card with less than $1,000 balance at the house. You took it, didn't you? You thief!
So I calmly told her.
That is the entirety of George's inheritance, you know. What?
Dorothy froze, so I explained.
That man couldn't save money, and near the end I was the one paying the living expenses, you know? And it seems he gave quite a lot to his mistress too.
Dorothy's face grew paler and paler.
So Dad's inheritance is seriously less than $1,000? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to live now? I have Kevin too.
I smiled at her and said,
Why don't you work? That's what everyone else does.
Dorothy was silent for a moment, but then shouted as if she just thought of something.
That's right. There's life insurance. You work at an insurance company and Dad must have had a life insurance policy at least, right? When is that money coming in?
I sipped my coffee and then told her.
He couldn't be bothered to sign up for insurance and didn't do anything. The only life insurance policy was one I took out with myself as the policyholder.
Dorothy shouted.
How much will that be?
So I answered.
Well, for now it looks like $500,000 will be paid out.
Dorothy's face lit up at that. But I swiftly added.
The thing is, I'm both the policyholder and beneficiary, so it has nothing to do with you two.
Dorothy's jaw dropped in shock.
What's that supposed to mean? Are you serious that we won't get any of it at all?
When I said,
Yes, that's right,
Dorothy screamed.
Then you take care of us like you've been doing. You're my mom and Kevin's grandma, aren't you?
So I calmly told her.
You two and I are strangers. I never officially adopted you, Dorothy, and I have no obligation to support you. Don't you care about Kevin at all? If I'm destitute, Kevin will be too.
Kevin was playing video games next to us as we talked. Seeing that, I sighed.
That's why I'm telling you to work so you won't be destitute. That's a mother's job, isn't it? I did it myself.
With Dorothy rendered speechless, her face deathly pale, I asked.
By the way, did you spend George's savings?
Dorothy replied.
Well, yeah, I used some since I needed it to live.
I laughed at that. Too bad for you. George had debts, you know. Was it $60,000? If you used George's inheritance, that means you inherited it and now have the obligation to pay back his debts. Just so you know, I renounced the inheritance. Seeing the color drain from Dorothy's face, I showed her the collection notices and such that were in George's phone. As she trembled, I continued. Oh, and about the house. I paid off the mortgage, so it's in my name now. I'm going to sell it, so hurry up and get out. Dorothy cried out.
You're going to take even the house away from us?
I looked at Dorothy. Yes, I am. With a serious expression and said. Dorothy's face went through a flurry of changes before she suddenly apologized very deeply. Amanda, I apologize for everything up until now. I apologize for what Dad did too. So please come back home. If you don't, we'll. As I remained silent, Dorothy made a praying gesture as she cried. Please, Mom, I'm begging you. Don't abandon us. I flashed them a big smile as I said my final piece. I will never forget the awful way you treated me all this time. Have a happy mother-son life together. Then in a final act of mercy, I paid for the coffee and left. After that, it seems Dorothy frantically searched for any other inheritance from George, but of course there was none. Dorothy was saddled with George's debts. She and Kevin went around asking desperately to relatives saying, lend us money. Let us live with you. But the relatives, having seen their true colors at George's funeral, refused to get involved. With no one willing to help them, all that was left for them was debt. I mercilessly sent them an eviction notice. Of course Dorothy resisted, but I had my lawyer tell her. If you absolutely refuse to leave, we can take this to court, but can you afford the legal fees? And so Dorothy and Kevin were forced out of the house. In the end, it seems the two of them ended up in a rundown apartment. There was no way they could live off just George's meager inheritance, so Dorothy had to go out and work. But with her personality, she quickly caused problems at her job and had to quit. Apparently Dorothy is currently working multiple part-time jobs to get by. As for Kevin, the change in environment made him act out even more, hurling verbal abuse at Dorothy and sometimes even getting violent. From now on, I want Dorothy to struggle out in society. And I hope she can raise Kevin to be at least somewhat decent. It might be too late for that though. As for me, I had no money troubles since the house sold for a high price and I received the insurance payout from George's policy. By the way, I tracked down George's mistress and demanded a settlement from her. It seems the mistress sold the brand name items George had bought her to come up with the money. Currently, I've moved out of my parents' home and am living alone in an apartment near my company, working hard at my job. Maybe because my stress is gone, work is going well too. I even accepted the promotion I had previously turned down due to my busy personal life. Soon, I'm planning to take an overseas trip I've always wanted to go on as a reward for myself. I've had enough of marriage and am determined to devote myself to my work and repay my elderly parents from now on. From here on out, I want to live positively, valuing myself and never being constrained by anything again. My name is Sarah. I am a 37-year-old stay-at-home mom. I've been married to my husband, John, for 8 years. We had difficulty having children, and it took us 4 years of fertility treatment. But our dream has finally come true. And to our surprise, we're expecting twins. I was so overjoyed that I cried in front of my doctor. When I told my husband about my pregnancy with twins, he was over the moon. Of course, my parents were delighted too. My in-laws, on the other hand, were utterly surprised.
Well, isn't this something? Not only Bob, but you too, John? I wonder if we have the genes for twins running in our family.
My mother-in-law said. Yes, indeed. My husband's younger brother, Bob, also has twins. Unlike us, Bob and his wife had children right after getting married. Their twin boys are currently 4 years old and at their mischievous stage. I'm quite anxious about raising twins, so it's reassuring to have someone nearby who I can consult about parenting. As the expected delivery date draws near, I struggle more with my huge belly. Being pregnant with a twin is anything but relaxing. It's a blessing to know that my twins have grown this much, without any major issues. These twins are doing their parents a favor even before they're born. I pondered, already feeling like a proud mom, as I somehow managed to get the housework done.
What's this? This doesn't taste right.
Despite my efforts to keep up with housework, my husband keeps complaining. I'm sorry. I couldn't taste it because I was feeling sick.
What's that about? Your morning sickness should be over by now, and you should be in your stable period. Stop making excuses.
There's no stable period with a twin pregnancy.
Don't make excuses. You're a stay-at-home mom, at least get your cooking right. And what's with this mess?
My husband is always angry and complaining. He doesn't help with anything. He won't even take out the trash. Besides my husband, who shows no sympathy, there's another one that stresses me out.
What's with this mess? Just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you can slack off.
I'm sorry. I've been feeling sick since morning.
Seriously, can you even give birth like that? You know you won't be done after just popping babies. Your job as a mom starts only after that.
Yes, I am aware.
Now, go fix my lunch.
My mother-in-law, who visits every day, is my biggest source of stress. My in-laws' house is about a 10-minute bike ride away. My mother-in-law shows up every day around noon, nags at me, then has me prepare lunch for her. And then she continues to nag and be mean to me until she leaves, a truly baffling behavior. I guess it's okay to leave my father-in-law on his own. I'm at my wit's end with my mother-in-law's daily assaults. I finally brought it up with my husband. Listen, my due date is approaching. I'm thinking of going back to my parents' home.
Huh? Aren't you supposed to going to be hospitalized before your due date?
Just stay here until then. I'm scheduled for a C-section, so I'll be admitted to the hospital a little before my due date. Yes, but we don't know when labor will start, do we? Besides, honestly, it's tough having your mom over every day.
What's that supposed to mean?
I told my husband about the daily onslaught from my mother-in-law. He knew she was coming over every day, but he probably didn't know that she stays for long. He looks a bit surprised.
Well, I understand it might seem a bit selfish, but isn't it because she feels comfortable with you?
Huh? She likes being around you.
She treats you like her own daughter, doesn't she? So be a little nice to her. Well, I could stand her before my belly got big, but now it's impossible. Don't you feel anything looking at this belly?
As I pointed to my enlarged belly, my husband just shrugged his shoulders. Well, I guess it is big and might make moving around difficult.
Do you realize how hard it is to walk with this belly? And yet, your mom keeps coming over and nagging me every day. She doesn't help at all. In fact, she just bosses me around. It might lead to irreparable consequences. Are you okay with our baby being affected?
Well, I certainly don't want that.
Then please talk to your mother. If you continue to ignore me, I'll fight for myself.
As I talked, my emotions ran high, and words slipped out unexpectedly. Seeing my surprise, my husband's eyes widened.
What's that? Are you talking about divorce? If things remain as they are, yes. I'm really at my limit.
If I continue to be troubled by my MIL. If my husband continues to side with my mother-in-law. He probably realized I was serious about it, and let out a deep sigh.
I understand. Really? Really? Can't you believe me?
It's not like that, but... To be honest, I am skeptical. There are signs that my husband values his mother more than me. Then let's do this. Prepare the divorce papers.
Huh? If you think you can't trust me and it's not going to work, you can file them whenever you want. How about that? Can you believe me now? Yes.
Seeing my husband's determination, I felt relieved. After that, My husband actually prepared the divorce papers and seemed to have warned his mother. In the end, I didn't return to my parents' place, but after that day there were no more onslaughts from my mother-in-law until I was hospitalized. Then I had a C-section and safely gave birth to twins. For a while after that, I stayed at my parents' home, somehow managing the whirlwind of first-time parenthood. However, as a new mom, I was struggling raising my twins. Then one day, my husband came to visit me at my parents' place. "Can you come back home soon?" "Huh? It hasn't even been a month yet?"
It's already been a month. Aren't you just having too much fun while leaving the house?
Fun. I have no such time. Being a mother to twins is tough. I'm enduring my painfully slow recovery from childbirth because of my advanced age, and yet I'm still taking care of our kids.
So what if you're old? There are plenty of people who don't return to their parents after giving birth. Stop being such a baby. Just come back home already.
After saying those harsh words behind, my husband left. Didn't he come to see our kids? Without even properly looking at his children or holding them, my husband left just like that. While calming down my crying twins, I too became sad and shed tears. Not wanting to strain our marriage, I returned home, shaking off my parents who tried to hold me back. "You finally came back. Do you even understand what it means to be a wife?" The moment I opened the door, these were the words that came out of my mother-in-law's mouth. She was waiting for me, standing there like a guardian statue. Exhausted, I found it hard to even respond, so I silently walked past my mother-in-law.
"Hey! Don't ignore me!"
Ignoring these words as well, I entered the room and was left speechless. I can't call this place my home. Looking at the disastrous state of the house, I unwittingly muttered these words. The kitchen was piled with dishes, with no space for cooking. The floor was covered with discarded clothes, garbage from empty lunchboxes, and more. And to think I had just been away for about a month.
Mother-in-law, did you come here while I was away?" "I was here all the time. I was worried about my son struggling alone."
"So you were here all the time, and we still have this mess. Worried about your son. And yet you just let our room turn into a mess? Anyone would fall sick in an environment like this. And it's unsanitary for my babies. She's raised kids before, does she not even care about basic hygiene? First, I will put my twins to sleep in the bedroom where their crib is set up. Then I started to clean up. Phew, I guess this will do for now. Just when I finally finished cleaning up.
Wah!
I don't even have a moment to catch a breath, with my crying babies. By the time I finished cleaning, the sun was already starting to set. "You're finally done? You're so slow," my mother-in-law said, while she sat on a chair and sipped her tea. It took everything in me to not splash her tea over her head. As my face strained while feeling my babies, my mother-in-law set down her teacup with a clink and looked at me, saying, "Oh, by the way, starting this weekend, Bob's twins will be coming over. You don't mind looking after them, do you?"
"Excuse me?"
I was so shocked that I had to take a long pause before responding. I mean, I didn't understand what she just said.
"Could you please repeat that?"
I said, "Bob, my youngest son. The twins from his family are going to be staying with us on weekends from now on."
"What do you mean by that?"
"We're doing this to give Bob and his wife a break. You're having an easy time with your own twins who just sleep all day, so it's only fair that you do this for them, right?" I don't understand what she means. I'm just dumbfounded. I'm not having an easy time at all. In fact, I'm so busy I barely have time to sleep. With the situation at home now, things are only going to be more rough. What on earth is my mother-in-law saying?
What's so hard about being a stay-at-home mom? I'm giving you a job to do, be grateful and accept it.
I can't.
You just can't because you're inefficient with housework. Don't make your incompetence an excuse. It's been decided, this is a done deal.
With that, she left. Just like my husband, she states her piece and leaves without hearing me out. But now isn't the time for me to be impressed at how similar my husband is to his mother. Like mother, like son. All panicked, I called my husband, who should still be at work.
What's up?
I'm busy right now.
Listen, your mom just said the most outrageous thing. She wants us to look after Bob's twins on the weekends.
Oh, that.
You knew about this.
I couldn't believe my husband knew about this.
Why didn't you say no?
Well, Bob's family is having a tough time. They can't even eat out because the twins are so rowdy, and they don't get any rest or time to enjoy themselves. Don't you feel bad for them?
Yeah, that must be rough, but why does that mean we have to take care of them? Your mom and dad can take care of them instead.
Mom and dad are too old for that. You want to put all that burden on them? You're so cold-hearted.
What about me? I'm already overwhelmed with taking care of our own twins.
Babies are easy, they just sleep, eat, and sleep again.
It's not that hard.
Oh, and don't slack off on housework. I won't allow any excuses. Keep that in mind. If you refuse, we're getting a divorce.
What? Aren't you going to help?
Me? No way. You want your hard-working husband to work even on his day off? You're a devil. There's no point in talking to them. Both my husband and my mother-in-law are the absolute worst. It feels like I'm talking to a wall. I ended the call in silence. Even with all the crap that I've been enduring, to my surprise, I'm still cool-headed. I decided to call elsewhere. A few minutes later, having ended the call, I found myself gazing at my sleeping twins. The adorable faces of the twins gave me courage. My husband and mother-in-law were solely fixated on their own interest over these cute little twins. There's not a shred of consideration for me. Whether they're around or not, my workload won't change. So with both my husband and mother-in-law, I've decided to completely sever ties with them. That night, my phone rang. Looking at my phone screen, it was from my husband.
Hello? I just got home. Why aren't you here? Where are you?
I'm at my parents' house.
What? You came back from the hospital. Why are you still at your parents' house?
I went back home once and cleaned up. It's clean now, isn't it?
So why are you at your parents' house now?
Because I'm fed up with you. With that, I ended the call and then turned off my phone. I thought he might call my parents' house, but perhaps it was awkward for him if my parents picked up, so no call came. Instead, the next morning, my husband showed up.
Hey, Sarah. You're here, aren't you? What the hell are you thinking?
To my surprise, my mother-in-law was with him. The lovely mother-son duo had made their appearance. Can you not cause a scene this early in the morning? As I responded with a displeased face, my husband yelled,
What the hell do you think you're doing? Hurry up and come back home. Yes, come back and take care of the house. What am I supposed to eat?
My mother-in-law chimed in. They both teamed up and exclaimed energetically. I thought, why don't you guys go eat some grass in the yard? But it wasn't the right time to strike back. I gave a cold stare to the two who were pressing me and clearly stated, My home is here. I'm not going back to the house where you guys stay.
What? Are you saying you're going to get a divorce?
Yes. Matter of fact, I submitted the divorce papers last night. You said it yourself. That I can turn in the papers whenever I want, if things don't work out for me. You said the same thing yesterday.
That's just a figure of speech. It's just to show my determination. Who would even take that literally?
I did. My husband seemed to be at a loss for words.
Sarah, you're just mentally unstable from giving birth, aren't you? Get another marriage certificate and come back. If you do what you're supposed to do, I'll forgive you.
My mother-in-law took over, trying to convince me. Go back, take care of you, and look after your other son's twins on the weekends. Is that what you want? I asked, confirming what my mother-in-law wanted out of me.
Of course.
I decline.
What did you say?
First of all, does Bob know that I am taking care of his kids?
Huh?
Bob didn't know that I was taking care of them, did he? Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law's face turned pale in an instant. Indeed. To my disbelief, my mother-in-law decided on her own to make me take care of Bob's twins. In fact, I had called Bob after I talked with my husband last night. When I explained the situation, Bob was very surprised.
You're already taking care of your own twins, aren't you? I wouldn't dream of burdening you with our kids too. Sure, our twins can be a handful, but we love them to pieces. If we left them with you on our days off, we wouldn't get to play with them.
In other words, my mother-in-law had taken upon herself to assume that Bob and his wife, who had casually mentioned that raising twins is hard, needed help. And so, she decided to take in the twins on her own. And then she tried to delegate the responsibility to me. I could never understand her. The divorce proceedings are done. Can you please leave now?
There's no way I can accept this.
My husband insists stubbornly.
Can you stop already?
All of a sudden, I heard someone yell from behind. When I turned around, my father was standing there.
Dad!
He was flustered.
You've been saying some pretty selfish things. Have you ever helped out around the house? Do you even look after the twins at all?
My husband was searching for words in response to my father's questions.
I'm tired from work. Oh? Yet I hear that you take breaks all the time without doing any significant work? Even when everyone else is working overtime, you always leave work on time. And yet I hear that you're always coming home late. Are you having an affair? No. I was just hanging out. Really now? You push all the housework and childcare onto my daughter and then go have fun. You have it easy, don't you? Well, that's...
In reality, my husband was employed at the company my father runs. While it's a small-scale business, it has a fair number of employees. And among them, my husband had been loafing around, acting high and mighty because he's the CEO's sister-in-law. This fact came to light when my father conducted an internal investigation. I had believed he was working hard late into the night, so I can't believe this.
I will ask you to quit the company due to your problematic behavior. There's no reason to keep someone who's not a family member any longer since you've divorced my daughter. What? No way! Get out of here. I'll give you a formal notice tomorrow. Make sure to quickly pack your things at the office early in the morning. Huh.
My husband turned pale hearing my father declare his termination. No, my ex-husband. My father turned his back on my ex-husband, and as I was about to enter our home, my ex-husband did something completely unexpected. My ex-husband forcefully pushed me aside and tried to barge into our home.
Hey, what are you doing?
My ex-husband was attempted to shove my father away.
Move. Hand over my kids. If they're with you, you'll come back, right?
My ex-husband was yelling nonsense.
Don't be absurd, using your own child as a hostage. Shut up. It's because you won't come back.
My ex-husband was desperately trying to force his way into our home. I clung onto him, trying to prevent his intrusion. My ex-mother-in-law was frantically trying to pull me off him. My father rushed to block the front door from inside. It was an utter chaos. If I let him take away my children, only the absolute worst would be waiting for all of us. I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Stop." Just then, I thought I heard the siren of a police car approaching, followed by a sharp brake noise in front of our house.
Officer, over here! Mom?
The person who squeezed past my father and rushed out was my mother. She hurried towards the officer who had just gotten out of the police car, appearing to explain the situation. And then,
What the hell? I'm her husband. I'm her family. What's wrong with entering my in-laws' home? I'm this boy's mother. Why are you cops here?
all right, we'll hear your story at our office. My ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law were vigorously resisting the police's questioning, and it seems they were eventually taken away. My mother, who had been watching our exchange from inside the house, had sensed something was off and called the police.
Thank you, Mom. I called because I thought something was wrong, but to think they would try to take away the twins, they're unbelievable. To try and change my feelings by taking our kids as hostage, they're awful.
After explaining the situation to the officer, we exchanged wry smiles. Later on, my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law got released, but they got a restraining order from me. After discussions through a lawyer, I was able to successfully receive a lump sum payment for alimony and child support. My ex-husband, who had been fired from my father's company and lost all his money, ended up living a hard life in a rundown apartment, working part-time. How do I know this? Because my ex-husband sent me numerous texts, repeatedly whining about his situation. I was wrong. I love you and the kids. Why was I so selfish? I've changed, can't we start over, or if you could just do the cleaning and laundry, I will forgive you. I will come back. I'll be waiting, and so on. Even though he says I was wrong, why does he end his texts with, "I will forgive you"? It doesn't make sense. Of course, I ignored him. I got fed up and finally blocked him. I heard from my ex-BAL, Bob, that my ex-mother-in-law had moved into my ex-husband's shabby apartment. Surprisingly, my ex-mother-in-law had apparently been asked for a divorce from my ex-FAL quite some time ago. Which explains why she came over to our place often. My ex-mother-in-law, who used to pick on everything I did, turned out to be a hopeless housewife who couldn't do any chores. I heard my ex and his mother are constantly fighting, as neither of them can do basic chores. My mother and brother have caused you trouble. I am so sorry. Bob apologized to me over the phone, sounding sorry. Bob must have inherited my ex-father-in-law's senses. Raising twins must be tough. Please don't hesitate to consult me or my wife. His supportive words made me very happy. After hanging up the phone, the cries of the twins echoed throughout the house.
All right, I'm coming.
As I peacefully watch my adorable twins grow, I feel nothing but happiness.